Hello, my name is Matt Fowler. I was in a group consisting of Jennifer Nazaro, myself, and Zachary Harvey. We did Mexico, and it's been a great experience to be able to learn more about the country because it ties in so much with our economy. Um, Being able to dig deeper into what all Mexico is about was a good experience. So we'll start out by looking at where Mexico is at. So Mexico is right here. For those who don't know, it is right under the United States. Actually, it is connected by land. Um, there's been a lot of infrastructure put in place to be able to travel from Mexico to the United States. Part of that is because of all the trade that is delivered from Mexico to the United States and also vice versa. It's also on right next to Guatemala and just all of the South America is very close. It's really a prime location. It's prime real estate for trade in many parts of the world. It's a natural point between, of course, North America, South America. It's also a natural point between East Asia and Europe, and it has an extensive coastline allowing for trade, um, by water, um, and it's got 3,000 miles of coastline on the Pacific Ocean. It has extensive coastline on the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, and it's one of the leading economies of the world. Um, and it has the eighth largest exports economy globally. So definitely, it's a big player in the global scheme of things. So we'll keep on going right along here. Transportation's role in linking supply chain and the economy. Mexico, it has the 11th largest economy in the world. So, like we said earlier, it's a big player, and much of that is focused on manufacturing, and with manufacturing, that really brings a lot of freight with manufacturing. You're bringing in the raw materials to be able to make the finished product, and so both ways, the imports and exports, it makes for a lot of freight being moved by all different types of modes. Um, Transportation makes up approximately 80% of the total GDP in in Mexico, which is a huge number. Um, that's pretty drastic, and so they have to be able to keep up. With that much GDP in coming from transportation, um, the economy is focused on their infrastructure. So in 2013, the Mexican president announced the investment program for transports and communications. Basically, this aims to invest a large amount of money in every type of infrastructure, with rail, the ports, and the roads. And they really needed this to be able to keep up, because there's a lot of traffic, a lot of bottlenecks, and a lot of idling time for trucks. This really plays a role in being able to have an efficient economy, being able to have your economy grow. If your infrastructure doesn't allow your economy to grow, then you're in trouble. And with 80% of your total GDP coming from transportation, they knew that they had to put this in place. So um, they're putting billions into the economy with with that, with about $100 billion with the investment program of 2013. So, and that's in U.S. dollars. So for free trade with NAFTA, that pretty much provides a direct link to the United States. The majority of their exports comes into the U.S. and $200 billion of untaxed goods come into the United States every year, and that's a big chunk. So yeah, regulatory environment of transportation, all methods of transport are really require a lot more regulation. It's just there's not very much regulation in the in any mode right now. No driving time limits in motor carrier industry. That's almost unprecedented anywhere in the world. If you recall, in the United States, they just implemented the ELD, the electronic logging devices, and it's just getting even tougher in the United States. The hours of service, and in Mexico, you can drive for a straight week, and and that obviously can lead to issues. Their motor carrier industry, it has a high volume of accidents, and this is associated with poor regulation. They don't have the funds, the resources, or the infrastructure to provide that proper regulation. And this is one problem with the regulatory environment of transportation in Mexico. Um, it backs up shipments, and a backup of shipments due to poorly overseen administrative activities and border controls. In their ports, sometimes containers can get delayed because they're not very efficient in their operations. They're currently working, to like we just saw, they're pouring money into the economy to build up their infrastructure, but it's just not like what we see in the United States, with the very efficient on the clock, always coming up with a better alternative. It definitely needs some work. Um, the regulation environment of transportation in Mexico. Um, the market environment of transportation, it's definitely interesting. Motor carriers take up 86% of all domestic freight in Mexico. That's a huge chunk, and part of the reason is because rail's not very widely used because there's no cap on rail prices. Shipping with rail can be expensive, um, and the cheapest way in Mexico is by motor carrier most of the time, um, and it's just a very motor carriers, as we learned in class, is very versatile. They can go anywhere, and it's usually the fastest shipment method as well. So if we look at the market environment, we see trucks carry about 71% of the value of freight from Mexico, and we're talking about this is going into the United States. Rail accounted for about 14.7 going from Mexico to the U.S. Vessels 7.7 and air 3%. Pipeline 0.7. So we see here that motor carriers is really the biggest the biggest player in the market for Mexico. The most important considerations for stakeholders who are looking into Mexico's transportation market is that the lack of regulation, it can lead to high risk um, in the movement of freight in Mexico. So if you were to be getting involved with shipments in Mexico, definitely the low regulation, no hours of service laws. There could possibly be loss of freight. There could be liabilities if someone gets hurt. So those are definitely something that you need to look at. Trade agreements, that's they can change at any time. We saw earlier NAFTA, $200 billion into the United States tax free. President Trump has been talking about possibly doing something with NAFTA. If you were to put all of your money with freight transportation in Mexico, and then all of a sudden the free trade goes away, that could be really troubling. It could really impact the economy in Mexico, and so with Mexico relying on free trade that much, that's something that you got to look for. Um, High volumes of freight with big name companies and manufacturing, it can to really high profits. So shipping freight in Mexico, there's definitely something. It's not all bad. I would say that there's a ton of freight moved in Mexico, and big companies are either creating finished goods in Mexico and bringing them over to the United States. So if you're a stakeholder, possibly grab onto some of that cash. So thanks so much for your time. Thank you for our group being able to present. Um, Thank you. Y'all have a great day.